Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into Roman history, but not just the dates and battles. We're using this YouTube link you sent, The Complete History of Rome Summarized, from overly sarcastic productions, to figure out, what it actually meant to be Roman. Beyond just conquering stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating how that idea of being Roman evolved with them, from a tiny city-state to this massive empire, and the way they told their own origin stories, that tells us a lot about how they saw themselves.
Right. Okay, so like Romulus and Remus, the whole she-wolf thing, 7 kings ruled for 244 years straight.
Yeah.
The video kind of hints that this was more like good PR than actual history.
Right, exactly. It seems like later Romans, especially during Augustus's time, they wanted this grand narrative that linked them back to figures like Aeneas, the Trojan war hero. It gave them this connection to the ancient world, like a sense of destiny.
So they were creating myths,
Oh.
but with a purpose. It wasn't just for fun.
Exactly. They took these existing stories, maybe there were some grains of truth in there somewhere, and they crafted this narrative that emphasized their key values. Welcoming outsiders, think Romulus, offering asylum, divine lineage, putting down tyrants. All these themes pop up again and again throughout their history.
And that kind of ties into their expansion too, right? Like they genuinely believed they were defending themselves, not just being greedy and conquering for the sake of it.
That's a key insight for sure. The video calls it their policy of expanding defense. But think about it, each area they conquered created new borders to defend, and their idea of a just war often meant striking first.
Which is how a little city-state ends up ruling an empire. But even as they were expanding, they had this whole republic system going on back in Rome.
Yeah.
Right. Senators, magistrates, plebeians. I'm already getting lost.
Haha, don't worry, it is complex, but the conflict of the orders, that's crucial. For over 200 years, the plebeians, basically the common people, fought for more rights.
And their main tactic was basically going on strike from the army. That's wild.
Essentially, yeah. They were the bulk of the soldiers. So refusing to fight that got the patricians' attention. Over time, they secured all these rights, to intermarry, to hold office, even to become consul, the highest position.
Wow. So Roman politics were just as dramatic as their conquests.
Huh.
And all this while they're slowly taking over the Italian peninsula.
Which leads to
A clash with another up-and-coming power, Carthage. And that's where those Punic Wars kick off, almost by accident, over some argument about Sicilian pirates.
It's always pirates, isn't it?
Yeah.
But things escalated pretty quickly, especially when Hannibal shows up. That whole crossing the Alps with elephants thing is legendary.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those military feats that just blows your mind. And his tactical brilliance at the Battle of Cannae,
Yeah.
that was Rome's worst defeat ever. Hannibal basically wiped out their entire army.
Yeah, I can only imagine the panic back in Rome.
And yet, their response was essentially, see ya next year.
Yeah.
They raised new armies, showing just how resilient they were. And that's where Scipio Africanus enters the picture. He's the one who finally takes down Hannibal, right? By learning from the enemy's tactics and all that.
Exactly. At the Battle of Zama, Scipio uses Hannibal's own strategies against him. And then there's that story about the Romans salting the earth around Carthage after they won. Might be made up, but it shows their reputation for ruthlessness.
So they defeated their enemies abroad. But back home, things were still chaotic. The video talks about the Grouchy brothers trying to reform things and getting assassinated for it.
Yeah, the late Republic is all about this growing instability. You have these powerful generals like Marius and Sulla. They use their armies to gain political power, totally breaking the norms of the Republic, leading to these bloody civil wars.
And this sets the stage for Julius Caesar, right? Like he's this larger-than-life figure who seems both brilliant and power-hungry.
Oh, Caesar is a fascinating case study in ambition. He was brilliant militarily, of course, but also a shrewd politician, a master of self-promotion. The video mentions that story of him getting captured by pirates.
And then demanding they raise his ransom. Like he already knew he was destined for greatness.
Haha, exactly. And he made sure everyone else knew it too. His campaigns in Gaul, which he wrote about himself in his commentaries, those were both military triumph and publicity stunts. And this self-promotion, combined with his political maneuvering, it leads him to cross the Rubicon and boom, ignites a civil war.
That die is cast moment. Huge turning point. He wins the war, becomes dictator. But didn't that effectively end the Republic? Even before his assassination.
That's the key point. The assassins thought they were saving the Republic, but it was already too late. The system was broken, power had shifted, and his death created this power vacuum, setting the stage for.
Yeah, Octavian, he's really interesting when you compare him to Caesar. Super ambitious, obviously, but also way more subtle. Like he understood that he had to keep the people happy if he wanted to grab more power.
Yeah, the video calls him a lying, weaselly rascal. But still, they say he was brilliant, so it seems like he was playing a dangerous game. Oh, for sure. But he was smart. He knew that the idea of the Republic was still powerful. So he gets revenge for Caesar, right? Forms this second triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus, all to make it look like he's working for the good of Rome.
Right. But this triumvirate, it wasn't exactly a peaceful time, was it? Like those prescriptions, that's scary stuff. Shows you how dangerous Roman politics could be.
It's chilling. Right, basically state-sanctioned assassinations.
Yeah.
Anyone who was a rival, anyone seen as a threat, they were eliminated. You know, Cicero, the famous orator senator, he was a victim of this whole purge. It shows just how ruthless Octavian could be, but also how calculating he was, eliminating threats, but doing it in a way that made it look like he was upholding the law.
It's crazy. And then there's the whole Mark Antony and Cleopatra situation. It's a love story, but it turns into this massive power struggle for control of Rome.
It's a story that never gets old, but it was more than just romance. Right, Octavian was brilliant at propaganda. He made Antony look like a traitor, seduced by this foreign queen, and himself. He's the defender of Roman values.
So even while they're fighting for power, he's already setting the stage for what his rule is going to look like.
Yeah. And then when he beats Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium, he's in the perfect position to take over Rome completely. But this is where you see how smart he was. He doesn't just declare himself king. That would have been a huge mistake. The Romans would have hated it.
He knew how important that image of the Republic still was.
Exactly. So instead, he takes on titles like Princeps, the first citizen, and Augustus, which makes him seem revered, almost godlike. He keeps the Senate around, but takes away all their power. He controls the army. He's basically emperor already, even if he doesn't use the title.
That transition from Republic to Empire, it's amazing. He completely changes the system, but he makes it look like he's upholding tradition.
It's a masterpiece of political strategy, and this sets the stage for the Pax Romana, this period of peace and prosperity that Rome had never seen before. He reforms the army, expands the borders, makes peace with the Parthians over in the east, and back home. He starts these massive building projects.
The video talks about the Era Cassius, the altar of peace. It's like propaganda, but really effective propaganda.
Oh, definitely. Augustus was a master of imagery. He turns Rome into this city of marble temples, forums, aqueducts. He's showing off the empire's wealth and his own role as this bringer of stability.
But the video also talks about a darker side to this Pax Romana, right? They say Augustus was a lying, weaselly rascal. What's that about?
Well, peace and order, they always come at a price, right? Augustus, he was practical. He knew that if he wanted stability, he needed control. So he exiles the poet Ovid because Ovid challenged social norms, and Augustus's whole reign, it was built on slavery.
Yeah, it reminds you that even in the best of times, there are injustices, things that people don't want to talk about.
Exactly. The gladiatorial games, for example, super popular back then, but also incredibly brutal. And Roman engineering, the concrete, the arches, the aqueducts, amazing. But a lot of it was built by slaves.
It's a mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
We admire what they achieved, but we can't forget about the human cost. And all that building, it wasn't just in Rome, was it? They were building cities all across the empire.
Yep. They standardized the way they built, using the same materials and designs everywhere, like Londinium in Britain. That was a planned Roman city built on a grid, with public baths, forums, temples, all the classic Roman stuff. They spread their culture, but they also imposed their will on everyone they conquered.
So they had this long period of stability and growth. But like the video shows, it couldn't last forever. The crisis of the 3rd century, that hits them hard.
It's like everything went wrong at once. Invasions, economic collapse, plague, weak emperors, emperors getting killed by their own soldiers. The empire was falling apart.
And it actually splits apart for a while, right?
Yeah.
There's the Gallic Empire, the Palmyrene Empire, Rome's losing control.
Exactly. These regions, they just break away, they see Rome's weak, and they take their chance. It shows you just how big and unwieldy the empire had become. But then you get these amazing figures, like Aurelian, Diocletian. They try to fix things, put the pieces back together.
Aurelian. They called him restorer of the world. That tells you how bad things were.
He reunified the empire through sheer willpower and military skill. But he was assassinated, which shows you that things were still unstable. And then comes Diocletian. He realizes that Rome is just too big for one person to rule. So he creates the Tetrarchy, divides the empire into 4 parts, each with its own emperor.
It's like the Roman Empire turned into some giant corporation with different CEOs for each division.
I like that analogy. And Diocletian, He also tries to fix the economy, separates the military leaders from the civilian leaders. He's trying to prevent the chaos from happening again.
And it's these reforms that kind of set the stage for the next big change, right? Constantine, the rise of Christianity.
That's where things really start to shift. The empire, it's already divided geographically, and now it's about to go through a religious and cultural split as well.
So we're talking about a divided empire reforms, trying to keep it from falling apart. And then along comes Constantine. The video makes it sound like when he converted to Christianity, that was like a major turning point.
Yeah, I mean, it really changed things, whether or not you believe that story about his vision. Before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine, he saw something in Christianity. It was growing, it could unite people, and maybe most importantly, it wasn't tied to the old Roman power structures.
So it was a smart political move, and maybe a real spiritual thing too. It's hard to know.
That's what historians are still arguing about, but what happened afterward is clear: the Edict of Milan. It makes Christianity legal, the persecutions end, and then Constantine he calls the Council of Nicaea. He's trying to get everyone to agree on what Christianity actually is.
But he's not just emperor now. He's trying to be like head of the church too.
Oh, he definitely wanted to have a say in things. And this mixing of church and state, it's going to have huge consequences down the line. But around the same time, Constantine makes another big decision. He founds Constantinople.
The new Rome.
Right.
Moving the capital east.
That's it. Constantinople. It's in a better spot for trade. It's easier to defend. And importantly, it's further away from all the problems in the West. This is key. While the Western Empire is struggling, the East, it's becoming the Byzantine Empire.
And they actually survived for centuries after the West collapses, right?
Yeah.
What was their secret?
Well, a few things. First, they had strong leaders, like Justinian and Theodore Justinian. He's famous for his law code. He took all of Roman law and organized it into what we call Justinian's Code. It was a massive project, and it influenced legal systems for centuries.
The video mentions Hagia Sophia, too, another one of Justinian's projects.
Yeah.
He seemed to really like building stuff.
He did. Hagia Sophia, with its huge dome, it's a perfect example of Byzantine architecture, a real symbol of their power. But it wasn't always easy for them. Remember the Nika riots?
Yeah, that was close, right? Almost overthrew them.
It was a real test of their leadership. There's this famous quote from Theodora Justinian's wife. She tells him, "Royal purple is the noblest shroud." She's basically saying, stand and fight, don't give up. And he listened to her. He crushed the rebellion, Theodora. She's often seen as the real power behind the throne. A really fascinating person.
So they had problems at home.
Mm-hmm.
But there was always pressure from outside,
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? The Persians, the rise of Islam.
No, yeah. They were fighting on multiple fronts all the time. But what's impressive is how they adapted. They created this thing called the theme system. Basically, they combined military and civilian authority in each province, made their defenses more efficient.
And they had Greek fire. The video makes it sound like some kind of super weapon.
It was terrifyingly effective. Imagine this flammable liquid that they could shoot at enemy ships. It gave them a huge advantage in naval battles, helped them win against all kinds of attackers. So you've got this military strength, political smarts, and even new technology. It all helped them survive way longer than the West.
But they weren't just about war, right? Their art, the mosaics, the icons, it's beautiful.
Of course not. The Byzantine Golden Age. It was this flowering of art and learning their art. It combined Greek and Roman traditions. It's incredibly rich, really unique, and they saved so much knowledge from the ancient world, stuff that might have been lost otherwise.
So if they were so successful, what brought them down in the end? The video says the Crusades actually weakened them, which seems kind of ironic.
It is pretty ironic. The Crusaders, they were supposed to be allies, but they ended up sacking Constantinople in 1204. It really hurt the empire. And internally, the theme system that had worked so well, it got corrupt. Plus, there was constant pressure from the east. Eventually, the Ottomans show up.
And they're the ones who finally conquer Constantinople in 1453.
Right.
The end of the Byzantine Empire.
Yeah, it's a sad ending to an incredible story. But even though the Byzantine Empire is gone, its influence is still everywhere. In art, architecture, religion, law, even language.
So we've gone from Romulus and Remus all the way to the fall of Constantinople. It's a lot of history. What stands out to you? What surprised you? What's important for people to remember?
What I find most amazing is how Rome, in all its different forms, it changed and adapted over time. From those myths they created about their origins to their engineering and their love, from their ruthlessness to their incredible culture. It's a story full of contradictions, but there's no denying how much it shaped the world.
Makes you think, right? If they were so good at adapting, why did both halves of the empire fall apart? Was it just inevitable? Or could they have done things differently?
That's the question historians will always be asking. And really, we just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to Roman history. What were you most interested in?
For me, it's the impact they had. It's everywhere. In our languages, our laws, our buildings, even our calendar. It shows you that the past never really goes away. It's still part of us today.
That's a great insight. And as you learn more about Rome, look for those connections, the echoes of the past that are still with us today.